All right, gang, so this particular video is to gear you up for the FRQs you're probably going to see on the AP exam. So in my video at the top of the week, I explain what the expectations are, what the College Board has said the AP exam is going to look like. So make sure you watch that first before you watch this video. But in this video, I'm going to kind of walk you through what I expect these FRQs to look like and kind of based off the information that I've looked up about some of this stuff. So the first thing they're going to ask you to do is a concept application, FRQ. And there's three parts to it: a task A, a task B, and a task C. And out of that, it's worth 3 points. So really 1 point for each task. So I took the general considerations, this is straight from the College Board, for the very first FRQ you're going to do this week. All right, FRQ number 1, it's a concept application about net neutrality. And that's something we've talked about in recent weeks anyway. So for task A, it says the response must correctly describe the function being carried out by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, in the scenario. The response must include a reference to the scenario. So it might be beneficial real quick to pause the video, maybe read this question first so you can walk through this as we're going through each task and maybe think about how you want to answer it. But anyway, so task A. You've got to correctly describe what's being carried out by the FCC. So essentially answer the question, but you have to reference the scenario. So an easy way to do this is to just simply take one of the phrases from the question and reinsert it here into task A. So for example, in this question, it's asking about net neutrality. So in my answer, I would say the FCC is carrying out the function of blank to deal with net neutrality. All right, so I'm referencing back to the scenario, which is net neutrality here. For task B, the response must correctly explain how an interest group can affect the process described in part A. The response must include a reference to the policy issue or content in the scenario. So again, this is just making sure you're still talking about net neutrality. You're not talking about the FCC bleeping things out on TV or something. So just stay on topic is what the second sentence there is. But one of the struggles I did notice when we did bell ringers like this throughout the year was sometimes you guys would forget to connect task B to the specific thing that you described in task A. Sometimes you would mention something else. This is asking you to connect the two. So make sure you read the instructions carefully on this because you've got to explain how an interest group can affect the process described in part A. Okay. So for task C, the response must explain how Congress could respond to this decision if it opposes the new rule. Essentially what this is doing is it's asking you to pull in information from the course and provide a solution or say, hey, here's what would happen moving forward. And I think most of you could probably do a pretty good job thinking of something for that. So this one's just out of 3 points. I'm really not too worried about this one for y'all because, you know, it already gives you some information. You just got to pull information in from the textbook, from readings, from our lecture, and I trust you guys can do that. We've actually done this one quite a bit as a bell ringer. The argumentative essay, this is the one people are probably going to be a little bit more worried about. So you'll have 20 minutes to write this one, 5 minutes to upload it. Some general considerations for you, okay? And this is based off of FRQ number 2. So this is the first day's FRQ that's an argumentative question. So this one is about, I believe, in the impeachment process. So if you want to read this question, pause the video right now. Before we go through it, I might recommend doing that. Okay, so general considerations. For task A, the response must include a defensible claim that establishes a line of reasoning on whether the congressional procedure outlined in the Constitution for impeachment and removal is an effective check on the president, if it's too weak a check on the president, or too strong a check on the president. Essentially what they're wanting you to do here, and I will tell you this is the most important part of the question, the most important task. They want you to take a position. Don't be wishy-washy and go, well, I don't know, this point's got a good case behind it, and that position, that perspective is pretty good too. They don't want that. They want you to take a position and stick with it, okay? And it has to be a position where people can attack you, where you can disagree with people. So don't try to be moderate and float around and say, well, all positions are valid. They don't want any of that crap. You're getting to college now. And Lord knows they're going to want you to take a position. Even if you actually disagree with the position in real life, they're not going to take this and give it to the colleges and go, hey, look, this student thinks this about this question. So don't worry about that. You don't actually have to agree with the position you take on this in real life. So take a position where you oppose another perspective or people can attack you easily on it. That's what's meant by defensible claim. Okay. So for task B1, B is broken into 3 parts really. The response provides one piece of evidence that's accurately linked to the topic of the question. Sometimes they will provide you with certain foundational documents to use as evidence, and they'll say use one of these. And so this is where you link that to the topic of the question. Task B2, the response provides one piece of specific and relevant evidence to support the claim or thesis. Task B3, the response provides 2 pieces of specific and relevant evidence to support the claim or the thesis. Task C, the response correctly explains why the evidence supports the claim or thesis. So task C is a little tricky because task B is essentially you citing your evidence that's accurate. Okay, it's relevant to what we're talking about. Task C is where you explain why that works. So if we're talking about natural rights in a question, you want to say, well, the Declaration of Independence talks about natural inalienable rights, as Thomas Jefferson says. You can't just say Declaration of Independence and leave it at that. You have to say why that supports your claim or your thesis, okay? So for task D, the response responds to an opposing or alternative perspective using refutation, concession, or rebuttal. Now, here's the key parts. To earn points for task B2, B3, C, and D, so pretty much the rest of the question, you have to first earn a point for task A, articulating a defensible claim or thesis. So that's why I told you task A is the most important here, because task A is the end-all be-all. This is where you make a claim or thesis. The rest of this doesn't make any sense to them unless you take a position on the particular question. So let me break it down to you a little bit simpler, okay? So for the topic of the prompt, this essentially is asking, what is the question about? And then for your claim or thesis, you need to write a defensible claim that responds to the prompt and establishes a line of reasoning. Please, and I'm begging you, use a because statement in your claim or thesis, okay? That is exactly what they're looking for, a because statement. So if this is asking, I don't know, about the minimum wage, you might say the minimum wage should be raised because it would lift people out of poverty, all right? That's your claim. That's your thesis. Okay, so evidence 1, use one of the docs from the list in the prompt to support your claim. So they'll have a list there, maybe Brutus 1, Federalist 10, the U.S. Constitution. Some foundational documents will be there. Use at least one of them, and then make sure you say how or why does evidence 1 support the claim. For evidence 2, you could use a second doc from that list, or you could use any specific relevant information you know from the class. Okay, and make sure you can identify it and link it up to the prompt. Then it says how or why does evidence 2 support the claim. So basically the same thing as over here. Why are you using this evidence? How does it support your thesis? Then the alternative perspective, okay? First thing you want to do is identify an alternative view. So you could say, let's go back to the minimum wage example here. Some people think that the minimum wage should not be raised. Okay, so I've identified an alternative view. That's number 1. Number 2, demonstrate an understanding of that alternative view. So it's not enough to just say, well, some people don't support raising the minimum wage. You also have to say why they don't support it. That shows that you understand their view. So I would say some people don't support raising the minimum wage because, so this is kind of using an alternative claim or thesis statement, because raising the minimum wage may increase unemployment. So then number 3 here, it says refute, concede, or rebut the perspective. So this is where you could say, however, that perspective is incorrect because, or that perspective is not enough to convince me because, and that's where you start refuting their statement. All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say there was an NSA data collection question that asked, is NSA data collection constitutional? So the topic of the prompt, this is my first part of my first sentence. NSA collection of basic metadata. So this is me showing relevance to the question and linking it up to the question. Then the claim or thesis is unconstitutional because of the 4th Amendment and the principles of limited government. Okay, so that's my because statement right there. So evidence number one, let's say that's one of the pieces of evidence they said I could use is the U.S. Constitution or the Fourth Amendment. So I say the Fourth Amendment protects citizens from illegal search and seizure without a warrant. Okay, my reasoning, well, the framers placed the Fourth Amendment in the Bill of Rights to limit the power of the executive from seizing citizen information to avoid the abuses of privacy they experience under British rule. Evidence number two. Now, this one doesn't have to be one of the things listed there, but I could just really pull it out of thin air as if I know it's relevant to this, and I can make a case that it's relevant to my thesis. I could say in the Declaration of Independence, numerous abuses of due process against colonists are listed as grievances against the king, violating natural rights and advocated for a limited government. The framers explicitly wanted to avoid an executive with the same unlimited power as what they experienced under King George. So that's me linking it back to why it backs my thesis up. So the alternative perspective. First thing, some may argue an essay data collection is constitutional. There's my alternative perspective. Now I have to show that I understand their perspective because they may argue there are limits to protections on the Fourth Amendment, just like there are limits to protections on the First Amendment, because in times of war, we may need to keep the country safe and secure at the expense of civil liberties. However, that perspective is incorrect because if the framers wanted there to be exceptions, they would have expressly written those down. If that were the case, our government could constantly justify their abuses of power in the name of safety and security, which is not what the framers wanted. All right, so there's me refuting the other side. Okay, so when they grade you, this is going to be out of 6 points. The first point is for your claim. Okay, you articulated a defensible claim and responded to the prompt and established a line of reasoning. Okay, you must do more than simply restate the prompt. Okay, so use basically what I just showed you. Make sure you have a because statement in there. Okay, evidence one. Student use one piece of specific and relevant evidence to support your claim. And then evidence two, student use 2 pieces of specific and relevant evidence to support your claim. So this is where you can get 2 points for just citing evidence. And then your topic evidence. So students describe a piece of evidence that was linked to the topic of the question. If no claim exists, this is the only point a student can earn. Point earned automatically if a student earns either evidence 1 or evidence 2. Okay. Your reasoning. Student explain how or why at least one piece of evidence supported the claim. Must do more than restate the prompt. And then 1 point here at the bottom for an alternative view. Students responded to a different point of view using refutation, concession. Concession is where basically you say, you know what, that is actually a really good point, and I concede that that is a hole in my argument. Okay, but you're still referring to an alternative point of view. Or you can rebut it and say this is why they're wrong. Okay, so I tried to make this really easy for you all. Some topics that the CED, and this is what you saw behind my desk. I had a poster of this. This kind of outlines the course and all of the learning objectives. So topics that the CED say focus on the concept application, and topics that the CED say focus on argumentation. Essentially what this means is whenever College Board makes a concept application question, there's usually certain topics they make that question about. And whenever they make an argumentation question, there's certain topics they make that question about. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to narrow down for you what to study based off of the type of question, because that type of question usually asks questions on a certain topic. So what you see highlighted in red here, these are the topics that are usually thrown up for grabs on concept application questions. The topics you see highlighted in blue here, these are usually topics that the argumentation questions are about. So I tried to take it even a step further, make it easier for you. What chapter outlines should you look at based off of those topics in units 1, 2, and 3? Because remember, that's all they're testing on this exam. Well, I broke it down for you by the section, so please take a look at this. This is basically all the chapter sections that you need to review. You can look at it directly in the textbook, or you can take a look at your chapter outlines to help you out with that. You may even want to have those ready and on standby when you take the AP exam. All right, that might be a good idea. Then lastly, foundational docs. Usually in argumentative questions, they're going to ask you to use foundational documents. Please take a look at this. This is also in your syllabus, and we've also done outlines of all of these documents. So dig that information back up. This is just kind of a quick review of that. Here's all the foundational documents, a one-sentence summary of what they're about. Really, the highlight there is the big emphasis of that document.